I went for a trip with the family to the San Diego Gulls game over the weekend. And that's a minor league AHL hockey team for those that aren't familiar. And I like hockey games. I love going to hockey live events. It's so much fun. And it's the first time in a while we've been able to get out as a family to a sporting event after COVID. My wife and I both are vaccinated. Our kids are, my daughter's 6, my son is 8 years old. And I was like, you know what? I feel comfortable enough. I've been hiding in my house long enough. Let's actually go out and do something. From all that I can tell, the pandemic is pretty much behind us. I mean, as good as it's going to be for the near-term future. So I was like, okay, let's do this thing. Let's go to this event. Let's have some fun. Bought the tickets. It was like 4 tickets for an AHL game. It was like $100, if that, after fees and taxes and all that stuff. And I was like, whatever, that's fine. Family of 4 going to a hockey game, $100. Okay, yeah. So we went to the game, and there was a line outside to get in, and then there was a separate line for unvaccinated people. And this is something I'm not familiar with. I haven't done my own research on what California decide. I haven't kept up with it, because to be honest, I hadn't cared, because it hadn't affected me. I'm like, whatever, I'm just doing my own thing, you know? So I see this other line, and it's for the people who have not been vaccinated yet, or the anti-vaxxers, or whatever you want to call them. There's a line of people trying to get rapid testing done to show proof of a negative COVID test before being allowed to enter the facility. And this is one of those things that on the surface, I'm like, okay, I get it. I guess that makes sense. You know, it's going to be a packed arena. You want to make sure that, especially because it's indoors, that these unvaccinated folks are not carrying the coronavirus and not able to spread it and all these other things. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I just, my mentality was that these tests would be like, you know, a couple bucks a piece type thing. And they just run through them and give everyone a test. It's like a courtesy thing. That's not what's happening. And that's what really concerns me with this situation. The COVID tests themselves, after we waited in line, because my kids are not old enough to get the vaccine, we waited in line for like 45 minutes, the line of hundreds of people. Like, this was a very long line. Finally got to the front, and then they tell us we need to give them insurance information to be able to get the COVID test. I'm like, why do you need my insurance information? Like, don't you just do the test as like a courtesy? They're like, no, these tests are $150 per test. And I look behind me and I see the line of hundreds of people behind me. I go, they're how much? He goes, well, it's free with insurance. You have insurance, right? I was like, yeah, I have insurance. He's like, well, then don't worry about it. It's free. I was like, it's not free. Like, someone's paying for that. That's a lot of money. So obviously my mind starts to wander into the realm of questioning what's happening here. Because when I hear that, it just strikes me like something nefarious is afoot. So I just asked some basic questions to the guy as I'm entering in my entire life history into this website that I've never heard of before. They had one of those QR codes on a sign, which, by the way, the sign was all the way at the front, so you couldn't get this prepared while you were in line for some reason. You had to wait 40 minutes to get to the front to see the QR code to then start entering your information. It's like, oh God. So we had to step aside and start entering our information for both kids. And the website, a no-name website, never heard of before, required my home address, my email, my cell phone number, social security number, driver's license, a picture of me in a draft suit. No, okay, it didn't require that last one, but I think you get my point. It required so much personal information, and I'm just putting it out there, you know, on the internet, just to get this rapid COVID test. And I'm like, I told the guy, I'm like, I don't really feel comfortable giving this information to whatever site this is. I don't know what they're going to do with this information, if I'm going to start getting solicitations, if I'm going to start getting contacted, phone calls, a bunch of junk mail getting sent to I'm like, not to mention, like, what are you doing with this information? Like, there's just so many questions. I was like, I don't really feel comfortable doing this. And the guy's like, well, then you can't get your test unless you're paying cash. Basically, he was like, F you, like, do it or leave. And I'm like, I mean, I get it from his perspective because he's got so many people to go through that he doesn't care. But there was very little customer service. It was just like a very, I hate to say Nazi, but it was a very Nazi feeling. It was like a prison camp that everyone's just lined up to do this stuff. And I'm just like, it's kind of like humiliating because you're in this line of people that refuse to get vaccinated for whatever reason. And then you have me and my wife that are vaccinated with our kids that can't be vaccinated. And just like, okay, I put all the information in and do all this stuff. And they're like, all right, go up to over there. Oh, by the way, waiting in line, no masks are required. And we waited in line 40 minutes. There wasn't 6 feet of separation because we're outdoors. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That 6 feet BS was just that. It was just BS anyways when the pandemic started because nobody knew how bad the virus was, or everyone was just freaking out for good reason because it was scary. Now we know a lot more about the virus. We still have a lot to learn, but we know a lot more. And the 6 feet of separation apparently just goes away because there's no... First off, if they required 6 feet of separation for that line, they would have been stretched to downtown San Diego from the Pechanga Arena, Civic Center, whatever it was. So it makes sense that they didn't care about the 6 feet of separation. But no masks were required in line from a bunch of anti-vaxxers. And I'm like, this is just kind of funny. Everyone's like standing bunched next to each other, unvaccinated. And then we get up to the front of the line, and it's still outdoors. And there's a table where they're doing the testing, and it says masks required beyond this point. And I look behind me, I look in front of me, I'm like, what's the difference? Like, why do we need a mask here, but not there? It just, stuff like that just drives me insane. It just seems like random rules for random people for random times. There's no, like, reason for it beyond controlling people. And I guess it got me a little bit frustrated. And I like to think I speak from a standpoint of somebody who has some sort of authority because I got vaccinated. I believe in the vaccine working. I believe in doing that. I think that's a good thing. But the way that they treated you in that line was just, like I said, it was humiliating. So anyways, we get up to the testing area and the lady asked for my phone number and my street address to verify the insurance information that I entered into the app or the website. It wasn't even an app, it was a website. And I'm like, okay. And I gave it to her begrudgingly. I'm like, here's my personal information that I entered earlier to verify it with this random site that I don't even know. And she's like, thank you. And I was like, can I ask a question? She's like, sure. I was like, how much do you guys charge the insurance company to do these tests? Because you said it was $150. The guy back there said it's $150 if I paid cash. How much do the insurance? And they're like, oh, it's nowhere close to that. The insurance negotiates a lower rate than that. I was like, right. But how much are they paying per test? Because there's a lot of people here. And they're like, oh, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter to you because it doesn't cost you a thing. And I'm like, but I'm paying for the insurance and the insurance rates go up if you guys are just making insane amounts of cash by charging it to the insurance companies and not even caring about it. And at that point, she contacted her manager behind her or whatever the lead person was. I don't remember what his name, like Chris or something, like Bob, like, come on over here. I got a problem here. I was like, what's the problem? And she's like, this guy is creating a situation here. And I'm like, what are you talking about creating a situation? I'm just asking questions. Are you not allowed to ask questions now? And she's like, well, you're being really rude about it, sir. I'm like, I'm sorry you're taking it that way. I'm just curious as to what all this is about. Like, this is all new to me, and I have some concerns about it, and I'd like if you could address those. And the guy behind it is like, what are your questions? And I was like, who contracted you guys to work here? And it's like, I don't know. I was like, how much do you get paid per test? I don't know. How long is this going to go on for? I don't know. I'm like, so you don't know any of this information, yet you are the head of this tent that is doing all this testing. And he's like, sir, is there a problem here? And I'm like, no, there's not a problem. Why are you guys trying to paint me like some insubordinate person that's creating an issue? I'm literally just asking some questions. And I get why, like, I didn't say this out loud, but I was like, I get why sometimes, not always, I mean, there's a lot of weirdos and jerks out there that definitely cause scenes, but sometimes genuinely good people are painted in a terrible light by these figures of authority just to shut them up. And it just like a light went off in my head. I was like, oh my God, like this is insanity. They're trying to make me look like a crazy person so that anything I ask or do or say is just ignored by the masses because it doesn't align with whatever goals they have in mind to get through with what they're doing here. So the long and short of it is my kids got their swabs. They stuck the Q-tip up their nose and took 20 minutes to get the test back, the results back. And I was like, okay, I still don't know how much money they made from this. And you remember earlier how I said I spent $100 on 4 tickets to get into this minor league Gulls AHL game. And I don't blame Pechanga Arena, Civic Center, whatever the name is, because they're just following the California laws that were set in motion by the loving Gavin Newsom. That I'd like to think, here's the thing, people think when I talk bad about Newsom that I just can't stand him. Here's why. He is the prototypical Democrat that has the best intentions, I'd like to think. But those intentions are completely broken and masked and destroyed by the reality. Like what they were doing at the Civic Center had no basis of assisting anybody. Because let me take it one step further. You can say, oh, you can find out for sure if you're positive or negative or not, and that's how you know you're not going to spread it. First off, those tests, what the reliability of them is like, 75%? So 1 out of 4 people that have it aren't going to be caught. So it doesn't even 100% guarantee safety anyway. Secondly, my kids, when we went through the gates, they didn't even ask for their vaccine status, or they didn't care about the rapid test. They're like, oh, those kids, they can just go. So literally we waited 45 minutes in line, entered all our personal information, waited 20 minutes for the results, and then I wanted to see if they were going to even check the kids, so I didn't even bring it up to them. And they just let us walk right through. And I'm just like, that's where the problem is. Because that's what I'm like, okay, there's definitely a miscommunication here between the people at the entrance and what they care about and what California cares about and what they're trying to get through. And it was just muddled. Everything, it was completely meaningless. Like the entire hour and 20 minutes or whatever it was, where we were literally late to getting into the game when we got there an hour early, it was completely meaningless. My frustration is these rules keep getting put into place. And there's no scientific evidence for any of the rules. There's no foundation for it. They just do it in the name of safety, which is the scariest thing you could put rules into place for. Safety. You know why? Because nobody can ever remove those rules once you put them in place in the name of safety. Look at 9/11. Like, this is a whole nother thing. I was driven insane by the overload of airport security after a couple airplanes got hijacked, which has happened multiple times throughout history, by the way. But for some reason, 9/11 changed the world. And the United States created an entirely new branch or department or whatever you want to call it for airport security or TSA or all that stuff. For what? People still get through with stuff. People still, I mean, if somebody wants to do something that nefarious and bad, if the FBI or CIA or whoever does the back end research on these people doesn't find them in time, they're going to find a way to get through. So they're not going to just waltz right through security and hope to not get caught. They'll just find a way around it. So the rules that are put in place don't actually protect anybody. They're just there to make you feel warm and cozy inside, to feel cuddly. There's a high likelihood of getting COVID if you go and you not a high likelihood, I shouldn't say that. There is a likelihood that you will get COVID if you keep going out to crowded areas, and eventually you might get it. But why is that risk being taken on by the government? Why is it not up to the individual to assess the situation and decide for themselves? I feel comfortable taking my family out. There's very low cases in San Diego. There's very low hospitalization rates in San Diego. So why are we being, I hate to say it, but it's like shepherded into cattle, like where you're allowed to go and what you're supposed to do by the government telling you it, instead of allowing the individual to have their rights. Like, this is literally an infringement of rights, of personal human rights. And people always say, oh, you can infect somebody else. You are responsible. The government's responsible because you might be sick and you might get someone else. There is a vaccine. And by all accounts, it works to a pretty good extent. So anybody who is like super concerned about COVID, get vaccinated. Alleviate those concerns. And if you're not concerned about it, don't get vaccinated. But you might suffer the consequences from it. But ultimately, it's up to you, not the government, not somebody telling you what you can and can't have to do. That's my frustration with this whole situation, is they hide behind the veil of safety to implement rules that have no basis of science whatsoever to make money. Follow the dollar. It's always about making money and how much money you can make. I said to my wife when we were in line, after I found out about how much they charge for the COVID testing, I was like, they're probably making more money from this COVID rapid testing line than they made selling tickets to a minor league hockey game. What kind of screwed up dystopia are we living in, where this is accepted, where it's acceptable by the general public? So anyway, I hit up Pechanga Civic Center on Twitter, and I asked them the questions that they couldn't answer in person. What's going on with all these things? And they ignored me. So they responded. They said, we're just following California law. And I'm like, okay, I get that. You're just doing your job. You're just following the laws, because that's how you do stuff so you don't get fined. I'm just here so I don't get fined. You know, that's Pechanga Civic Center. Following the law. Okay. But then answer the questions. How much are the insurance companies paying per test? How much money are they making per night doing these tests? How much is the company that's contracted getting paid? Who hired them? What backroom deals were made? Who is in charge of all this stuff? Why is that all so secret? Yet we just put all our personal information on a website we've never heard of because we're forced to if we want to get into the game that we paid for. California logic. Like I said, love the state, hate the logic. I'm going to leave it right there, guys. Hope this does something to open eyes. I'd love to hear what people think. Let me know in the comments below, because unlike the state of California, I'm open to conversation. I'm open to dialogue. I don't know why they aren't. Thanks for watching. You stay smashing.